So why should I be the expert in how you eat? Just because I have a PhD in nutrition? Yeah, you think so? Oh, well, I am a registered dietitian. That really goes a lot longer, quite frankly, than that doctorate when it comes to nutrition advice. But I've also run 4 marathons, New York twice, Boston once, Disney. And I used to race all the time. You see a lot of little running things coming back to haunt me. So I do know quite a bit, and I am a certified sports nutritionist. That sounded terrible. I do know quite a bit. I meant about this topic. And I am a certified sports nutritionist. I used to work for the NFL, and I have been working with all 21 teams at Sac State now for the past 3 or 4 years. And even though I am officially retired from Sac State so I could take on a job at University of San Francisco, where I am setting up a nutrition program for their health professions at college, I still am working with the teams there. So hopefully that will give you a little bit of confidence in what we're going to talk about today. I normally draw on a board. I'm one of those old-fashioned professors who actually still draws on the board, although I would have put a slide up there for you if I had known that was available. Calories. Comes down to calories, doesn't it? Well, I could give you the physical definition of a calorie about, the amount of energy needed to raise 1 degree, blah, 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 But a calorie essentially is energy, isn't it? So you need energy. And where do we get energy? There's only 3 places we get energy. I don't care what they write on those bottles. I don't care what they write on those bars or whatever. There are only 3 places: carbohydrates, fat, and protein. And your body's favorite one, by a long shot, I mean by a humongoid shot, I mean like by thousands of times, is carbohydrate. So you can imagine somebody in my position living throughout the last 10, 15 years in this country. Come to my house and you'll hear somebody screaming at the TV because I am in constant I'm in constant fighting and this dissonance with what you are being told on the web, on the television, Dr. Oz, I did this, I did that. And the facts are, you need calories, and the body wants them as carbohydrates, more specifically as glucose. And it's going to do everything it can to get the energy you take in to that level to be utilized. Okay? Some things are more easily changed into glucose than others. Sometimes we need glucose straight away as glucose so we can act immediately. Other times we would prefer our glucose to be in a form that took some time for it to be released so it can be used over a period of time. But carbohydrate is your primary source of energy. Name some carbohydrate foods for me. Just yell them out. Pasta, bread, potatoes, fruit. Thank you. I love you. Who else? Vegetables. Thank you. I love you too. Hey, Carmen, how you doing? Okay. Here's the thing. A lot of you are yelling out. You think of pasta. You think of bread. You think of cereal. Those are all, let's lump that all into grains, shall we? And if I had a board right here, I would be writing down grains. And in that, I would be listing corn, rice, wheat, barley, quinoa, rye, oats. Did I say oats already? Et cetera, et cetera. Now, I want you to think of your day. Think of your day. And in the United States of America, we are a wheat-based country. That is our staple grain. Think of what you've eaten today and of all of the potential wheat products in them. Bagels, English muffins, toast, cereal, pizza crust, crackers, sandwich bread, pita bread, tortillas. Everything I've mentioned is wheat, and biscuits. We could go on and on with this, couldn't we? So there's nothing wrong with that. Denying that and refusing that when that is part of our cultural background for many of us is really stupid. And we should go ahead and accept this is what is going to be our staple. Let's make it good. Let's make sure that the wheat that we do take in is of a very high quality, i.e. whole grains. I tell my students, I have one of my former students from Sac State right here, right now, and I always say to them, their freshman year, I'm going to tell you something this first day of class as a freshman, and your last day of class as a senior, I'm going to repeat the same thing, and you're going to realize that in those 4 years of studying nutrition, that is all you've learned. And that is whole grains, more vegetables, and fresh fruits. Bang, done. Great diet. You know, and you can go out and be a dietitian and just say that. Yeah, eat more whole grains, fresh fruits, and vegetables. If we all did that, none of us would be having any of the problems that we have. So whole grains, that means 100% whole grain written on the label. And can we tell them what's coming? Can we tell them what we have coming up pretty soon? I've spent some time with Whole Foods. Whole Foods is one of our sponsors, and I spent a good month analyzing every single label in that store. Wow. Yes. I mean, I got to where the manager, I live in Davis, and so I did the Davis store, and I got to where I knew all the different managers from all the different shifts, and they would come out after a while and they'd get me a chair. And they just let me sit there, and they'd bring me things from the back. You want to look at this one too? I'm like, oh my gosh, you have more stuff back there. It was so hard because I have so much good stuff. But the point is that even on their labels, you have to make sure it says 100% whole grain. Because in this country, the FDA or the USDA, who does our grains? Is it FDA or USDA? I think it's FDA. Okay, I was quizzing one of them. She didn't know she was going to have a test today. You're allowed to call something whole wheat if there's 2 tablespoons of whole wheat flour in it. And then, so you can say whole wheat, but then you still have to list enriched or unbleached flour. Enriched means they've added back the things that were taken out during processing. So it's a good thing they're doing that, but that also means that there's no fiber or very little fiber. I am recommending 100% whole grains to you guys in everything that has got a grain in it. For example, 100% whole grain bread, 100% whole grain pizza crust. Huh, it's going to take a little research on your part, isn't it? Now, I know in Davis, Steve's Pizza, I'm from Texas, by the way, and I'll slip into that southern in a little bit, but Steve's Pizza does 100% whole grain. So does Woodstock's right there in Davis. And I know that Steve's has a outlet here and in fact, I did this for the Sac State football team. I found all the places around Sac State that had whole grain pizza crust. And we even did it in our sports nutrition class. We developed these little cards, so I know you can find whole grain. Whole grain pita, whole grain bagels. Think of all those little things, you guys. If you changed all of that to be whole grains, you would not only be improving the fiber in your diet, which, by the way, is going to solve some of those pesky bowel problems that you all have. We'll talk about that in a minute. Not only is it going to do that, but all of the parts of the whole grain that are really, we don't give much, not credence is the wrong word, they don't get much airplay right now because they haven't been studied that much. But there are other things to whole grains that we don't really know or understand the efficacy of them. But that doesn't mean that they don't have some sort of impact on your performance. Okay? So whole grains, fresh fruits and vegetables, carbohydrates. We don't get to abbreviate carbs as carbs anymore because the second part of carbohydrate is the word hydrate. Yes. Carbohydrates have in it 3 chemicals, 3 elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The carbon is the carbo part. What do you think the hydrogen and oxygen part is? The water, hydro, exactly right. So when people restrict their carbohydrates, not only are they restricting the form of energy that their body adores, and by the way, that you have been evolutionary selected for. It's not like you woke up and decided you like sugar. Honey, that was decided a million years ago. Okay? That's why you survived. Okay? The people who liked sour things and stuff and things that were tart and kind of wicked tasting, they're dead. Because those plants tended to be poisonous. The plants that were sweet that our hunter-gatherers were getting tended to be non-toxic to humans. And so that branch of sugar lovers, we lived. So you should celebrate that and accept that we are carbohydrate animals and embrace it and live within it and do it well. right? And so the whole grains is one of the ways of doing it well, okay? Another one is the vegetables. No one, I don't care how good you are. I don't even care if you're from Texas and you live on soul food like I did growing up. We do not eat enough vegetables. You think you do, but you don't. You should be having at least 6 servings a day. That's someone my size. I'm 5'2". You know, some of the athletes I work with that I actually put on specific diets, they're supposed to get like up to 15, 20 servings of vegetables a day. Now, a serving is only half a cup, okay? So you have a full cup, and that would be 2 servings. You have 2 cups, that'd be 4 servings. So it's a little misleading, and it's sounding like so much. But we should be eating vegetables all day long with every meal. In the morning, have some sliced up tomatoes with those eggs, right? Have some spinach stirred in with your eggs. Have some vegetables. And then during the day, snack on vegetables. Fruit is easy to snack on, isn't it? And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? As long as you're eating natural whole fruit. I don't recommend canned fruit. I don't recommend even dried fruit. Because think about it, the part of the carbohydrate you're trying to get, you've just dehydrated it, all right? I'm not saying it's always wrong. I'm just saying I'm not recommending that. Frozen fruit is one of the few things that I would recommend, especially for those of you in a budget. Remember, I work with college students, so they go to Costco and they get these great big bags of mixed berries. That's great. There's nothing nutritionally deficient with those. Nutritionally, from the perspective of the flash freezing that Mr. Birdseye perfected in the state of California back in the early 1900s, the nutritional value is the same, and it's fine. Okay, same with frozen vegetables, and that for me, like I live alone, and so I cook for myself, and so buying lots of fresh stuff every now and then, it's going to go bad before I get a chance to eat it. So I like having the frozen stuff in the freezer. So nutritionally, it's just as good. What I wanted to tell you about carbohydrates as well, and in this current theme of paleo, and this current theme of paleo and avoiding a high protein and low carbs, is that you cannot be fully hydrated just by drinking water. You cannot drink enough water in a reasonable amount of time that is going to keep you hydrated. Am I without the camera range?
No, you're good. I just have an announcement really quickly. Does anyone have a silver Nissan van that's hard to have? It's, okay. Sorry, and keep going.
Okay. Back to me. Okay. So it's really important that you understand that in order to get all the water, the hydration you need to get a certain amount of it from your food. In fact, your body expected you to get it from your food. Can I walk over here? Okay. Your body expected you to get it from your food, not just be able to drink it all. All right? So just please keep that tucked away, knowing that I need to eat carbohydrates not only from an energy perspective, but I need it to be hydrated. Okay? Really important. And in fact, we played a game in our sports nutrition workshops with our athletes where we would have a cup of strawberries and they'd have to guess how much water was in it. It got to where we only did the amount that everything had 1 cup in it, so that the right answer every time was 1 cup of water, and it took them a while to get that, but eventually they did. Eventually one guy went, yeah, wait a minute, every answer has been the same. Oh, yeah. But anyway, so there is a lot of water there's even water in the grains you drink, okay, the carbohydrates. And it's not like, because you're thinking of water as a liquid. As a biochemist, I think of water as just hydrogens and oxygens. Okay, and when I think of condensation reactions of different molecules coming together and forming, long chains of glycogens or peptides or even fatty acids or triglycerides, all of those are condensation reactions where water is released. So there is water produced by all of these foods. All right, so that's carbohydrate. Okay, and we can come back to that. Then your body's second favorite form of energy. Now this is a tricky one. It's not fair. You can't answer any questions anymore, Karen. All right. The body, fat is the second most useful. However, It's not the second one it goes to in times of crisis, i.e., times of running, times of you are out there the first 30 minutes of running, 30 to 45 minutes, your body preferentially is going to choose glycogen. And glycogen is a storage form of carbohydrate. It's going to break down glycogen until it gets some glucose. That's preferential. And I could give you the energetics of that, and I could talk about how it's going to save an ATP here and there because it doesn't have to phosphorylate G6P coming into the cell, and therefore it's more, you know, it doesn't lose one going on down the glycolytic. I could give you all that, and you guys would go, oh, wow. Just trust me on this. Your body prefers glycogen for the first 30, 45 minutes, the carbohydrate from that. Even if the first 30 minutes you decide to drink Gatorade, it's not going to use it as energy right then. It's still going to be using your glycogen stores. But after 30 to 45 minutes, when the body has used up more than 15% in a fairly fast clip, the body starts looking for other ways to fuel itself for the future. It says, I do have more glycogen, and I'm going to continue to spend it, but I'm going to slow down the spending of it, and I'm going to look for an alternative source of fuel because I don't want to mess up all my glycogen. Hang on a second. That alternative source of fuel right away is going to be amino acids. Because amino acids, the really good ones, like the ones that are like alanine and glycine and what? Oh, you're doing your branch chains. Nice good job. No, she's actually right. Isoleucine is the queen of all the branches. So some of these amino acids that I was thinking of the ones that are very easily converted to glucose, and it would be alanine and glutamine. These are the ones that are going to very easily, by losing just an amine group, a nitrogen, they're going to be able to make little fragments of glucose. And so therefore, that's called gluconeogenesis. In other words, it can cause some gluconeogenesis, create some energy by going backwards and making some glucose. Anybody see a downside to using amino acids? Where do we keep amino acids? Muscles. And in biochemistry, we have this thing where we say your body does not store amino acids. It does not store protein. And you know why we say that? It's because we don't want you to think that these muscles are a storage thing that you're supposed to use up when you're hungry. You know what I mean? Glycogen and fat, which is the storage form of your lipids, of your fat, those are supposed to be used when you need energy. But you're not supposed to be dipping into your biceps and your quadriceps and your heart muscle when you need energy, right? So there was no storage form of protein, but it is useful in times of crisis, which might be a very sort of acute energy need. You're going to go to protein because it is easier to convert. Now, if you use that preferentially, because let's say that you do not stop your body's usage of that by drinking Gatorade at that correct moment. I'm sorry, I'm using the wrong, by drinking noon or taking gel or whatever. I'm sorry, I went to University of Florida. We're all about Gatorade there. All right, so anyway, if you do not respond appropriately during that time period by taking some carbohydrate source, your body will continue to use your protein. Okay? That's why Dr. Cade, who developed Gatorade for the Gators, I might add, at the University of Florida, that's why he said, dude, the coach, he was calling dude, you need to give them this carbohydrate replacement drink so they're not using up their protein. But don't give it to them too early. You give it to them too early, and all you're going to get is a bunch of fat production. Okay? So carbohydrate replacement within 30, 45 minutes, which we're going to be providing for you on this course as well. So am I going against race protocol on this? Okay, good. All right. Then the third macronutrient, the third nutrient that gives us calories is fat. So carbohydrate and fat, part of their reason for being is to provide us with energy. And both of them have storage forms. So carbohydrate, our instant use is glucose. Storage form is glycogen. Fat, our instant use is fatty acids and glycerol, and those two come together, make triglycerides, and that is our storage form of fat. So the two things that we're meant to use the most for energy have actual storage forms. They have attics, right? Whereas protein doesn't. It has got about 10 different functions in the body, and its main one is your structure and support, antibodies for your immune system, your vision, your hair, your muscles are made up of visceral protein, or excuse me, your organs are made up of visceral protein. You don't want to be using that for energy, but you definitely need it to be strong and to be there. That's why protein should have an important part of your diet, but it should never be more than 20% of your diet. And if you guys go onto the blogs that we've had over the years on our website, I've given you, in one of these, I've given you the exact formulation of how to figure out your protein RDA. That is your, do you remember that? Your recommended dietary allowance. That is the only macronutrient that has an RDA. And I've told you exactly how to figure it out for yourself based on how much you're running, whether you're a marathoner, et cetera, okay? Because it does alter a little bit if you are out there pounding the pavement more.
And I'll be posting those forms in the CIM University group, so you guys will get all those forms.
And I walk you through an exact equation and everything of how to do it for yourself if you want to figure out your own RDA, okay? And then it's pretty simple to figure out grams of protein that you get from food because it's listed everywhere, okay? All right, so those are our three forms of where we get our energy. And the other nutrients that we need, the micronutrients, are our vitamins and minerals. Those do not provide us with any energy, no calories. However, they are very necessary, and they are very influential in how our body uses our energy, okay? Especially the B vitamins. I never recommend anyone take any kind of supplementation unless you've seen a physician and they have told you about it. However, I don't think it would ever hurt anyone to take one multivitamin. And the best multivitamin that we have looked at, we looked at it in a lab. We actually put it through the digestive system of the human being. And Centrum, I know, Centrum came out ahead. So that multivitamin, take it with a meal, and that probably should do you just fine. So, you know, I could just walk around with this. So anyway, so what about running? How does running change all this? Well, running, it makes this even more important. Your protein amount is important because it needs to be high quality because you're not going to be getting as much of it. Okay, because you're going to be increasing your carbohydrate. So I have trained a few Olympians before who were runners and 10Kers and some Ironmen, quite frankly, and I would have them on 70% carbohydrate, 20% protein, 10% fat. Now, it's very difficult to do, but these are people who, you know, they're whack anyway, let's face it. So, but having that high of a carbohydrate and pushing the protein, I made sure their RDAs were covered. Don't get me wrong. When 20% of your calories, if you're eating the amount that you need, it's way more than your RDA for protein. Trust me on that. But it was the fat being down to 10% that was so difficult. But it's another necessary part. So for training for the marathon, how many of y'all, this is your first marathon? Oh my gosh. You guys, I am so jealous. Your first one is, I mean, it's just so much fun. Oh. After that, you've got a record to beat every time. Or it's like, I got to get to Boston. Yeah. No, so good for you. And, you know, just love it and have a great time, okay? The most important thing I can tell you is that what you eat and drink the night before and the day of your longest runs, you know what I'm talking about? This is your training, people. That's your training. That's what you're going to eat the night before and the morning of your marathon. So be messing with it. You know what I'm saying? If you're having certain things and you're feeling, I know I used to have like popcorn the night before, and boy, it was a big mistake. Or if I found I had a little bit of ice cream the night before, all of a sudden the next day was great run, right? You know? So you start getting to sometimes some superstitious stuff, but hey, if it's not going to hurt you, then go for it, right? So make sure that you're trying different things and that you are kind of honing in on how you want to feel and how did that first mile feel and where do you want to have the bathroom stop and yada, yada, yada. And make sure you try that out, okay? I generally recommend the day before an all-out event like a marathon or an Ironman, no protein, Zippo. Now, you might get a little bit from that milk you put on your cereal. There's a little bit of protein in your grains. You might get some sort of, you know, standard buy protein, if you know what I'm talking about. But no hunk of meat, no eggs. I know. That's what I'm saying. That day before, you carbo, I would carbo because that's hydrating you as well. All right? And then the morning of, and by the way, that day, it's okay to have your whole grains and whatnot, okay? By that night, I would start trimming down on the whole grains. That might be the night I don't have whole grain spaghetti. That night, maybe I have white spaghetti. And then the morning of, and again, this needs to go to what you've been training for, but for whatever you've been doing, but I recommend that in the training you start incorporating the morning of, that, but these long runs and therefore the marathon, that you have, this is the time you get to have bleached flour. This is the time you can have those Fruit Loops. I'm not saying a bunch of simple sugar. You'd be surprised. Fruit Loops isn't as bad as you think it is. I know. But to go ahead and have some of that more refined flour that is going to be very available to you as you start running. Okay, it's not going to be like drinking solid sugar, like if you were drinking Gatorade or the Noon that we have that has some carbo in it. It's going to be accessible to you, but not all at once. Okay, I know with the football team, I noticed that they were giving them granola bars at halftime, and we had terrible third quarters. So I was working for Coach Coughlin at the time, and I said to him, I said, those granola bars are going to kick in about an hour after the game. They're going to feel really energetic. They're going to have the energy. He goes, oh, really? I thought you could, Deegan, you're always going on about whole grains. I can't win with you. And I'm like, well, how about we change it to fruit? Let's just have fruit, and let's just have like little blueberry muffins, because the players get kind of nauseated. Let's have little blueberry muffins, or even just little plain kind of like sugar cookie kind of plain cracker type thing. And oh my gosh, that really, really made a difference. You'll notice on the course, that's exactly what we're giving you guys. You're welcome. I know when I first met with Eli, the race director, and Scott, our kind of our boss, we sat down and talked about, you know, what should we have on the whatever, and I was telling them about, well, let's have little, you know, blueberry muffins or little brownie bites or little, you know, and they're like, what? What are you saying, Deegan? This goes against everything you tell all of our teams. I say, yeah. But when it's in a race situation, you guys know what I'm talking about. When all you're doing for 26.2 miles, or some of you don't know yet, but you're squeezing Noon, or you're drinking the sugar drink, sometimes your stomach can get just a little, and all you can think about is, man, I wish I had a saltine right now. You know what I mean, women who've had babies? We live on saltines the first 3 months. So that's the idea of giving you that little bit of I think we have Madeleines on the course. Is that right? Madeleines, and we have little brownie bites, because it was hard to find things that are already prepackaged, you know. And then fruit. We're giving bananas and orange slices. Again, you're welcome. So, you're welcome. And then the Noon, of course, with the goo. And this year we're doing a little bit different with the Noon. There's a new product out where they are adding a little carbohydrate to the Noon. So we have the race director and Scott and I sat down and we did our magic and did the math, and I went home and did some stuff, and we have our own CIM Kool-Aid, if you will, where we have taken the Noon and we are mixing it in a way that we think is safe and is effective for you. You'll notice, I think Alyssa handed out copies of that, but you'll notice that we're titrating it slightly. I had slight concerns about a couple of the minerals, actually just one, and I wanted to make sure that no matter how much you drank, you could not have more than the upper level for that one. It's the magnesium. So So that is our special Kool-Aid that you will not be getting at any other marathon. That one has been specially formulated for y'all. I know. Very cool. At this point, I think I just want to take some questions. If you have any. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned about backing off on the protein the night before and that morning. Like, I get kind of shaky if I don't have enough on days or I haven't eaten a lot of protein. So I get kind of shaky.
You get kind of shaky of what?
I get
See, I'd be walking back there to hear you if I could, but they have trapped me up here.
I get shaky like I'm gonna pass out.
If you don't have protein?
Yeah, because I've eaten like I've gone through like where I've tried to I've tried to do like salads and fruits and vegetables and things like that, and then I noticed that I get a little.
Well, you know what? I thank you so much for asking that question, because I think that's a really relevant point. Because I tend to, because I'm a teacher, I tend to make things a little black and white sometimes because I'm trying to teach a concept. But I hope that you understand that this is more of a continuum. In other words, there's not this no protein. You know what I mean? You still need your protein, don't get me wrong. In fact, in your vegetables, for every serving of vegetable, you get 5 grams of carbohydrate, 2 grams of protein. So even in that broccoli, half a cup, there's 2 grams of protein. So I'm not trying to ask you to not have your protein. Please don't go away with that message. I'm having to overcompensate the other way because this country has gone so far, right? So if you find that within your own training that there's certain food that keeps you from getting that feeling, then I would say you need to incorporate it into your training, okay? Only you know what works best for you. The only thing that I would advise you to do during this training time, and this is what I always tell the athletes I work with, training is for training. Training is for experimentation. Training is the time that you figure out all this so that when it's competition, you can compete. See what I'm saying? During the competition, you're competing. Now, some of y'all may just be trying to finish, but hey, that's competing, all right? But during training is when you experiment with what you're doing and figure out what works. So if you feel like that you could be better, and that's what I always ask the athletes. I say, I've got my routine down. So, you're 19 years old, you got your routine down. Are you the best you're ever going to be? Do you ever think you're going to be better? Are you ever going to be better at running than you are today? Well, if you are, you might want to consider some dietary changes to help that along. And so I would put that to you and say, am I going to be better at some point? And if so, how can I take, what Dr. Deegan said about sports nutrition and incorporate that and still make it work for me? Does that make sense to you? It was a bunch of probably nothing advice to you, but that's what I would do, okay? Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure if this is for the nutritionist part of you or...
I'll let you know.
Okay, so goo gut, what is it?
Goo what?
Goo gut. You know what I'm talking about? Goo gut.
GI distress.
The tummy distress from
that comes...
goo.
Uh-huh.
Why do you get it, and why do you think the baked goods will alleviate that?
I don't know. And because the baked goods have got the best buffer in the world in them. So I'm assuming there's some type of pH challenge going on in the gut, and that's usually what causes distress. And actually what causes distress is some kind of malfunction. And malfunction is usually then traced back to a pH imbalance. And so if we can correct the pH imbalance, usually then we can get things on the right track. But why that happened to begin with, I'm not sure. But baked goods do that because of baking soda, sodium bicarbonate, absolutely. Yes, sir.
When do you recommend taking the goo or the food? Because everybody runs at a different pace, so it wouldn't be at these designated miles, maybe after so many minutes or something like that. I mean,
that is a really great question. His question was, when do I recommend you take these things? Because not everybody is at the same mile marker, at the same minute of their race, etc. And we really, really have tried to take that into account with these different stations and what's being offered at them, because we know that like you may reach the 5 mile mark within for you 20 minutes, right? No, my point is that you might get there a little more quickly. Okay? And I would suggest that someone who is a more elite runner, who is going to get there more rapidly, they also are better at mobilizing. Their body has, with the question someone asked earlier about glycogen, you actually can adapt to mobilizing glycogen more readily and for longer periods of time based on your training. And these are very fine elite moments. So I would say that in general, for someone who is running a faster pace, you probably should be taking something by 30 minutes.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I usually wait until 90 minutes for a gel.
Okay, well, what mile are you at 90 minutes?
Now.
Is that too
maybe-
personal? You don't have to share it with us if you don't want to.
Yeah, in the past, it was probably halfway or.
Halfway. I would say, and it sounds like you were fairly successful. Don't get me wrong. There are some runners I have trained before who they don't take anything throughout the race. They might take some water, but they're done. And I always have felt to them. I had one lady I trained. She drank 2 pots of coffee before every race. But she was a winner. She went to the Olympics. I mean, so there's certain things that you're going to do that are your formula that I can't explain. But what I would say this, and I said to her all the time, if you can run that fast after drinking 2 pots of coffee and keep that up, you have no idea how good you could be. So I would say to you that if you waited 90 minutes into your race before you took, maybe gel isn't the thing, maybe the noon now with the carbohydrate should be the thing for you, you're going to feel better. You're going to have a better race, and you may have a PR. It's those little things, but you need to try it before the day of the race, dude, okay? The worst thing y'all could do is to do something new the day of the race. There's always those rookie runners who they get the new shoes, and they're saving the outfit, and they're saving the shorts, everything for the marathon. And they're into 1 mile of the marathon, and the shorts are driving them crazy because they're catching on their thighs, and you know what I'm saying? And you've got to stick with that for another 25 miles. So be careful. Run in the tried and true. Okay? Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just to add on, we don't have the first station till 7.5 miles, and then there's another one a little bit later. So you might want to go to the stations and grab 2 gels so that you can have it in between the next one. But definitely shooting to eat at least every 30 or 45 minutes something.
You know what I have recommended, and I don't know what we're going to do about this, because I'm hoping that we have some sort of table of just water the first mile or 2. Did Eli tell you guys that?
There's an aid station, I think, for sure around mile 3. I don't
That's
know
just water.
Yeah, well, there's water at every aid station.
I know, but this one's just water, right? At mile 3? 3. It's got, okay.
It shows noon.
Yeah, now.
Okay. Now, so there's noon there. For those of you who it takes 30 to 45 minutes to get to that first table, that's for you. For the people who are there within the first, 15, 20 minutes of the race, that ain't for you. Keep going. All right? Take the water and move on. There is some new research. I love having to keep up with all this new stuff that showed that the very elite runners, and by the way, this is epidemiological evidence at this point, which means for the scientists in the group, it means this is only observational data. There is no causal connection yet, just a relationship has been established between having caffeine, a little bit of caffeine toward the end of the race, improved their performance, not at the beginning. So I know some of you have your own thing, but I have to admit to you that I would be recommending to you that you avoid the products, some of the noons that have caffeine in them, until toward the end of the race. And maybe that's the time that you take one of those flavors that has a little jolt of caffeine in it. That's just brand new research.
So you'll see our goos. We've got 3 flavors this year. We have one, it's strawberry banana, that is caffeine free. And then we've got 2 other ones, vanilla bean and tri-berry, which both have caffeine in them.
And so I would recommend saving these toward the end. Now, once again, if you've never tried one of these before, should you try it at mile 17? No. Y'all try it, and you never know. You may turn you into Roger Rabbit, and you may go wacko, right? Seriously. Never try anything new the day of the race. All right. Let's start. Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering about chocolate milk. Is that,
What about chocolate milk, darling?
It's
I
good.
actually this last year would drink it after a long run, and I felt great.
Well, that's a very interesting point you bring up, and thank you for bringing that up, because last year or the year before when we did this, our focus was really trying to teach you about pre- and post-competition carbohydrate to protein ratios. Remember that? And I'm not really spending any time on that, but bringing up the milk question really does answer that. Milk is the perfect post-workout beverage because the carbohydrate to protein ratio is 3 to 1. In other words, there's 3 grams of carbs for every gram of protein in milk. So you think milk, high protein. Well, yeah, it is, but it's higher carbs, okay? It's the perfect food for recovery because it's after a workout that you need a little bit, or your body could use a little bit more protein, not only to replace and repair the muscle tissue that you've just damaged, or for some of you, you're working on muscle accretion. That's the time when your body is going to take it on so that your muscles will get bigger if you like. But it's also for all of those other 8 functions of protein, your immunobodies. In other words, your immune system. So your immune system has been compromised after a long run. And it is within those 2 hours after a run that you're the most susceptible to catching anything. So when I was in most of my training, I had young children, my little girls, and I'd go for a long run. I'd be gone for 4 hours, run with my friends, and I'd come home and I wouldn't even let them near me for 2 hours because I didn't want to get sick. I'm kidding, that didn't happen. They clearly were all over me and we all got sick. But the point is that it is fairly important that you understand that you are replacing that protein not just for muscle repair, but for your immune system. And when I work with professional athletes or even collegiate athletes, that is the #1 problem in most athletes is staying healthy all season long. And it has to do with this carb to protein ratio. So we encourage chocolate milk. The chocolate just makes it a little more palatable for some people. For some reason, that there's after a run, that little sweet, and actually that little bit of extra sugar coming from the chocolate does give you a little bit of fat in there. I do recommend you get the non-fat chocolate milk if possible, okay? Just because while we need fat, we do not need the saturated type that comes from the animal products. Okay, good question. But can I just make a blanket statement and say that most of these products, and I'm speaking to you as a professional, a scientist, a dietitian, and most of the products that are marketed to you, you don't need, okay? You don't need them. Most of what you need, in fact, I am convinced that you can get everything you need from the food you eat. I am a food-based scientist. Now, does that mean that there aren't some things that can help you on the road, etc.? Certainly there are, because we aren't really meant to run marathons or these long runs. We weren't made to do that, and so some of these foods make it easier for us, especially since we can't go out to the farm or run by the orange tree and pick the orange and eat it as we go. Our world is not like that anymore. But any time that it's possible, always substitute food rather than packaged. Do you know that research tells us that in this past year it has come out there are more men from the ages of 18 to 40s who have a diet or an eating disorder than there are women. And do you know why? It's this new type of eating that men have started. They don't eat food anymore. And college men, especially college athletes, they live on bars. Those aren't real, those don't grow on trees. Those are made in a laboratory, They're living on powders. They're living on drinks. And they have developed this dysmorphic idea of how they're supposed to look. And so they're going to take all of these products that the guys in the gym who look like they want to look take. So I would really encourage you anytime, and I hope I'm not getting in trouble here with Fleet Feet, but I would encourage you to use food. But there are times, like I said, that are special times that sometimes these can help you through certain races. Yes?
So talk about taking food, you're on a long run. I like the pretzel food that gives you salt in it, a little bit of that. Someone else mentioned dried apple nut. Like if you're going to do something more natural than
Right. I will confess to you that in the marathon training and marathons I did, and I used to compete in triathlons, I never ate anything. I always just drank my Gatorade or whatever. But some people, well, I did a lot of it, I'll be honest with you. So this eating during the thing, oh, there was one time in Harlem, that's not true, this little old lady gave me an orange slice and it saved my life. In fact, I literally, I started crying, hugging her, and she was like, oh my God. Like, you have no idea, you just saved my life with this orange slice. You get very emotional at mile 17, at least I do, but anyway. So I would not worry too much about that. I would really try to do it with the drinks that you concoct. But if you are someone who has got sort of the stomach issue that you're talking about, carry along like half a banana or some saltine crackers with you. I would do something like that. I don't know that I like the idea of dried apples, quite frankly. But what was the other one you suggested? Pretzels. That's not a bad idea. And the only reason the salt is good is because it's going to make you thirstier and you're going to drink more. We purposefully, your body, after you've been drinking, your kidneys are much, much better than you realize. They save that sodium, girlfriend. Within a few miles, it is saying, wait a minute, we're losing too much sodium here. I'm going to wang back on, I'm going to hang on to the sodium, and I'm going to let the water go because they're sweating. We need to keep the body temperature. That's what's important. So when you finish a run, if your blood, if we test it, would be what we call hypernatremic. In other words, it would be higher in sodium than necessary. So when you take more sodium after a run, you're making it even more concentrated. So it's water that you need to get the isometry back together between your interstitial body fluids and your blood, if you understood any of that. Yeah.
So there's been people in our training that have talked about pickle juice. Pickle juice. So explain to me.
Pickle juice, again, Charlie, we've done this every year.
Charlie knows what to talk about in our training. So I don't understand why people are recommending pickle juice.
Well, you know, and this is one of those things that, again, some people, it seems to have some sort of, you know, amazing effect on them that I can't explain. But I will tell you that it was making the circles among college cross-country teams. And that these teams, they're starting to pass it to each other. I finally heard it at Sac State there with one of the cross-country coaches. It was after Scott had left. And so I started doing some research on it. And there is a study came out 2 years ago that there's absolutely no positive effect from pickle juice. Okay? Some people, there's not a detrimental effect either over drinking like a Gatorade or something. You see what I'm saying? So, but there's nothing special about pickle juice. There's nothing, it is higher, you know, it's a higher salt liquid. Really, after you're through working out, unless you are what we call a salty sweater, and that's not a sweater like you wear, but a sweat, you know, that you really don't need, you don't need that sodium. As a matter of fact, I feel like I'm teaching my sports nutrition. I'm going through the textbook in my head here. That if you're only working out 2 hours a day, you don't need anything. You just need water. Your electrolytes are fine. Get over yourself. Seriously. This idea that you've worked out for an hour and, oh my gosh, I've got to get those electrolytes right, blah, blah. No. No. Your kidneys have way done that, okay? The only electrolyte problems come in when you're running at that 2-hour mark and you keep going. Like those 4-hour runs or 3-hour runs, or it's really, you Californians have no idea what it's like to run in the South, so I don't think y'all ever have weather here that is bad to run in. But if there is some type of weather or environmental situation that causes you to hyper sweat, then that could be a problem as well. Most of you, unless you're a salty sweater, and by the way, half of you are going to come up to me after this little thing tonight and say, I'm one of those salty sweaters. And I say, no, you're not, because less than 0.1% of all people are salty sweaters. They're the ones who literally, did you guys see that triathlon of that woman crawling across the finish line because she passed out? She was a salty sweater, okay? What that means is that her sweat continually has higher degrees of sodium in it than everybody else. And so therefore, she is much more likely to hypotension. She is much more likely to have her blood pressure drop so low that it becomes actually a deadly situation. Those people need to be stopped. You know, that lady, they know now more than they did back then. That lady was on her, you know, she should have been stopped long before they let her do that. because that was a very dangerous situation. But most of us, if you're in good shape, you've been training, you'll notice, and you may have already noticed this now, you start sweating more rapidly. Have you noticed that?
Yes.
The better shape you're in, the more rapidly sweat production. Can anybody tell me? I'll play professor now. Someone give me a reason why you think that good training is going to cause your body to sweat more rapidly or to begin sweating more rapidly. Give me a reason.
I think you're going to go for a long run. Maybe your body's getting ready for a big workout.
Okay, that could be, but why? It doesn't really know but why would someone who's in really good shape have, and you kind of hit on it, but I'm going for something a little more elemental. What does the sweating do for us?
Cools you down.
Cools you down. In other words, but you said cool me down. The body's main function of calorie burning, the number one thing it burns calories to do is to keep you 98.6 degrees. That is the most expensive thing we do. Okay? So if you run in very cold, you really burn more calories then than you do running in the heat. But since we're talking about most of the time running in this type of weather, we're going to be sweating. And the better in shape you are, the more rapidly the body will start keeping your temperature at a homeostatic level, okay? Also, your kidneys become trained. The more rapidly, the more in shape you are, the more rapidly the kidneys will start retaining sodium. So you start sweating more rapidly, taste your sweat right away, and then taste it a minute later. It should not taste salty anymore. The people who are in the best shape will not have a taste of salt to their sweat within 5 minutes. Does this make sense to you? Now, I know you may find that I can't really taste anything right now, but we actually measure this. When I worked for the NFL, we actually took some players to the Gatorade labs in Chicago, and we actually have a way of measuring the salt we would train them. We would train these athletes how to taste the salt, because it was an important marker, biomarker for them of knowing, where they were in their whole hydration status. Anyway, okay. Yes.
We are at 8 o'clock, so I'm going to take one last question, and then we're going to do some giveaways.
We are? Am I a part of that giveaway? Oh, I'm going to ask them questions? But they have more questions. Can't we just give them giveaways for having a good question? Okay, go ahead.
So how much water and noon should I always never know, like, how much water should I be drinking during the marathon? Like, is there a point where you have too much, or like what's not enough?
Yeah, and that's a really good question too. And this whole too much question got a lot of press back when that whole hold your wee for a wee or something, that radio station, remember that? They died. And so the only time you can get too much water is if you're not urinating. So that is the body's response to, I've had enough water, I have too much, I need to pee. Excuse me for my non-scientific language. If you're holding your urine, then you actually could possibly have some kind of problem with too much water. But if you're urinating when you feel like urinating, there's no problem. If you're drinking water, I cannot tell you once on a marathon that I ever had to urinate, ever. And I drank all the time. It's because I needed the water. You see what I'm getting at?
So should you study at every station? Should you be drinking like 1 or 2 hours?
This is where your training comes in. What is your plan? Everyone's got to have a plan. It all depends. Like if you're going for time, going through every station and picking up something's going to screw you up big time. So, but if you're not going for time and you're just going to finish, stop at every station, talk to everybody. I'm serious. I mean, the first New York I ran, my left arm, I realized after mile 15 was killing me. It's because I had been slapping hands the entire 15 miles. But anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you're going for time, and then the other thing is, are you supposed to do it just while you're going, or should you stop?
It all depends. What have you been doing in your training?
Well, I do it a certain way in my race, but the first time I ran a marathon, the last 8 miles, my body felt
closed down.
I didn't know if I should have done something different.
Yeah, you should have, clearly. So you need to take what you did for that marathon, and if I were actually working with you one-on-one, we would we would take apart, we would parse that marathon and what you did, and we would make amendments and see how it went through training. I had a colleague who used to run with a straw because he always choked trying to drink while he ran. So he ran with a straw that he tucked into a little pocket, and he'd be running along, you know? So, I mean, but that was he was an experienced marathoner. He knew what he was doing. So that's something that you're going to have to figure out. Is there a formula for how much water you should be taking, like so many blah, 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 blah? No. That is the one thing in the now sports nutrition textbooks that is the one nutrient that it talks about is everybody has to have their own personal plan. Okay? And that's going to work with you. I mean, there's some old standards of what, like, you know, people have been told by coaches and stuff, and so many mils per this or whatever, that actually we now know can almost be a little dangerous, because you could be one of those people who needs a lot more than that. So it's going to have to be something that you try out and see how you feel. Okay? And my answer is, if you feel like you need to urinate during a long run, you're drinking probably too much. Except for you women who've just had children. And that's a whole nother pelvic floor dysfunction. I was going to talk to you about that tonight. There's been some new research. Did you read about this? About all of those bowel problems that sometimes runners have? There's a whole thing about pelvic floor dysfunction that talks about it's not just those Kegels, you guys, it's our core. Anyway, I don't think we're going to have time to get into it, but were you going to say something?
I was just going to bring a buzzkill to it all. No amount of fueling and calories and water can save you from poor pacing. So that's the number one key. Going in with an appropriate goal pace and staying on pace so that you're not going too fast and burning too many calories. That dying with 8 miles to go probably had more to do with going out too fast than
Absolutely.
any nutrition.
Absolutely. Good point. Thank you, Charlie. Yeah.
Just kind of back up for a second, but if a runner sweats a lot more during the first half and a lot less during the last half of the long run,
Why would that happen?
That's my question.
Okay, if you stop sweating, then there's a water issue, and you should probably stop running. If you start feeling cold, you really should stop running. Okay? Because that means that your temperature control is out of whack.
Yeah. I don't stop. I just do less. It trails off. Sort of,
Yeah. Yeah, maybe you need to be drinking more water toward the last part of your race. I mean, the last part of your runs. And that's what some of us do is we get tired. We just say, okay, I've been doing well the first 8 miles. I'm just going to get through, I'm going to slug through these next 5, dadgummit, you know. We lose, it's a lot of mental strength, and no one's kidding you when they say a marathon is, you know, I think it's probably 5% physical, 98%, 95% mental, right? I mean, it is mental. It's a mental fierceness that you have to really believe in and know that you can do. That only comes from proving to yourself that, you know what, I can run 12 miles. There was a time when 12 miles was a real for me. And then, you know what, I can run 17 miles. Wow, I can run 22 miles. You know, so I think that mental fatigue can set in to where you stop maybe hydrating and eating toward the last part, and that's when you can start some of these feeling tired. But that's again where your training comes in, to where it's just rote. It's just like, okay, it's mile 23, you got to pick this up. It's right, okay.